Hi Joe, I am your Secret Santa. Well done, congratulations. And obviously I thought long and hard about what you get the guy who's already got everything. And what I've come up with, I'm hoping you'll enjoy. It's basically a curry class, curry kit. If you look in the box, you'll find all the ingredients to make your very own curry from scratch. And if you follow the link, which I will give you, you'll find an online video made by yours truly, which explains from the word go exactly how to make your perfect curry fill. Enjoy, Joe. Happy Christmas. The best way to make sure that the pieces of onion are the same size, not too big, not too small, is to first of all cut the onion in half and then cut it down the length without actually completely cutting the bottom bit of it, turning it 90 degrees and then slicing through to make sure that the little pieces are equal in size. Do this with both halves of the onion, and when you finish that you can put it to one side. You can make a curry without onion, and people use all sorts of things to give it consistency and a sauce, like yogurt. I don't tend to use yogurt. What you find with the onion is that when you cook it properly, cook it through, get rid of any moisture, then it soaks up the sauce and makes it nice and thick. Right, this is the raw ginger, and start by taking off the skin. Again, you don't have to, but if you do, it gives you consistency and you don't have any rough bits in the curry. So again, cut down the length without completely going through at the end, and then making sure you get little bits of ginger. You can crush it in a garlic crusher, although that can be a bit tiresome, or you can pound it in a mortar and pestle, the way the Indians do. This is the garlic. I think garlic is pretty essential to any curry, and you can put as little or as much as you like. I tend to use 2 cloves of garlic. Take the skin off, peel it, get rid of the skin, and then you would probably want to crush that, although you can cut it. Again, an optional ingredient is the green pepper or capsicum. There are loads of different ways that you can take out the seeds and prepare this. I'm kind of skewering it like this and just shaving off the white bits, and then chop it into equal sized pieces. This gives your curry a nice sweet flavour. The curry that I've cooked for this demonstration, I cooked in a frying pan. I don't normally use a frying pan. It's possibly better to use a saucepan, because if you're using potatoes, which I'll do on this particular one, you're more likely to be able to cook them all the way through evenly. As you can see, I'm using lard here, or fat. You can use vegetable oil if you like, but it's quite important to have quite a lot of oil or lard. You want things coated properly all the way through, but oil and lard cook at different temperatures, and I quite like the way in which the lard cooks the onions. I've just put in some cloves. You don't have to use cloves, but I like the aromatic smell and taste they give. Then, as you can see, I've put in the onions now. Give them a bit of a stir, make sure they're evenly coated, and this whole process I've cut down in the video. I've cut down the time it takes by speeding things up and editing things out. But as you can see, it's on a kind of medium to high heat, number 7 out of 9. I'll turn it down a little bit later. And this whole process should take about 15 or 20 minutes. As I say, I've speeded it up, as you can see, and you'll notice the onion going darker and darker, browner and browner. What you want to end up with really is a kind of golden brown colour. If it's too brown or burnt, it'll give your curry a bitter taste, which isn't terribly nice. If you don't cook it enough, you'll end up with bits of onion in it, some of which might not be properly cooked. But the whole idea is to cook them down so that you cook out the natural moisture in them, and then when you add moisture to it, whether it's water or tomato juice or whatever it is, it will absorb that liquid and it will create a nice thick sauce. So as you see, I turned down the electricity to 6 and it's getting quite nice and brown, but there's still a little way to go yet, and this whole process has taken about a quarter of an hour, and it could take as long as 20 minutes, but just one onion should be sufficient. So now we're putting in the raw garlic. Crush it in. I mean, the smell that it gives off at this stage is just glorious. It's you know, one of the pleasures of cooking is the smells that you get when you're adding the different ingredients, and garlic is one such notable pleasure. The next thing that goes in will be the ginger, and normally you would probably, I mean, if you were Indian, which I know you're not, and neither am I, but you know, normally they would make a paste out of the garlic and the ginger, crush it all down. I just do it this way because it's it's easier, I think. And those are the raw chopped potatoes going in. As you can see, again, they're equal size. You don't want some things being cooked and other things still being a little bit hard and raw. And because this is just really a curry for 2 people, and Carmel loves her potatoes. I like potatoes, but I prefer the meat. So I've just done just a couple of potatoes cut into cubes. And the next thing that I'll put in will be some turmeric. Now, I don't like to measure things out particularly, and everything is really a little bit of guesstimation. But if you think in terms of all of the spices being round about a teaspoon, that's the fenugreek. See, probably a little bit more than a teaspoon going in there. And thirdly is the curry powder. You could put more or less according to taste. If you put in too much, you might find that your curry is a little bit gritty, a bit too much powder in there. If you put too little, it can be a little bit tasteless. But I like to put those 3 in first, so turmeric, fenugreek and curry powder. And normally about perhaps half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of fenugreek, the same of turmeric, and the same of curry powder. True aficionados would perhaps scowl at curry powder, but I was taught originally, 40 years ago, by a proper Indian cook, and he said put in curry powder, so I do. Gives it a kind of a consistency. Next thing to go in is cumin. Don't like to put too much cumin in. It can be overpowering and can linger in the pores, if you know what I mean. But coriander, which is next one, you can let your hand slip with coriander. It's very much a staple of curry, and you know, you could put in more than a teaspoon, perhaps even 2 teaspoons. Stir that all in, make sure it's all evenly distributed. And next thing to go in will be, I think, the tomato puree. So tomato puree not only thickens the mixture, but also gives it a nice tomatoey taste. You can put in a can of tomatoes if you wish, but I think if you put in tomato puree and tomatoes, it can be a little bit overpowering. It can just become one single taste of tomatoes. So you can see I've been quite liberal squirting that in. It's probably about 1 or 2 tablespoons of tomato puree, and that'll give it a nice consistency and also impart that nice tomato taste. So the heat here is 6. It's you don't want it to be too low. You do want the spices to catch a little bit, and you know, if you see the proper chefs doing it, they sometimes throw in stuff and flames coming out and, you know, proper smoke. I'd rather not do that, to be honest, but as you can see, it's bubbling away nicely, and it's you know, the tastes are becoming ingrained into the potatoes. That's the green pepper or capsicum going in, followed by the meat. In this instance, it's chicken. Again, try to keep the sizes standard, and you know, it's basically how much you want to eat on your fork. That's what determines it for me. If it's too big, you're going to have to end up cutting it anyway when you're eating. If it's too small, I tend to find it's a little bit, I don't know, a bit mean somehow. So I normally have the cubes of chicken round about the same sort of size as the potato, perhaps the potato a little bit bigger. You need to get that chicken properly blanched on all 4 sides. I don't like really going on to the next stage until the chicken is looking cooked on the outside. Don't like to see it looking pink, but I don't suppose it really matters. It's just a question really of it cooking evenly all the way through. So next thing, again completely optional, this is the creamed coconut, and I buy it in these little sachets from the supermarket. You can get it in large blocks, you can get it in different forms: coconut oil, coconut milk, desiccated coconut. I like this stuff, and the way I've done it here is not really to be recommended. I've kind of put it straight into the pan, and then I've put some water on top of it. Ideally, you would want this to be properly melted, properly turned into a mush before you mix it in with the rest of the curry. Because what can happen, if you're not careful, is that a lump of it will stay undissolved, undiluted, and that can be pretty nasty if you just get a spoonful of it. So you've got to make sure that this coconut is properly dissolved into the mixture. And you can see here, I mean, it'll dissolve with heat and with liquid. I think on the packet they recommend that you dissolve it in boiling water before you add it to the curry, and that's probably the best thing to do really. If you're cooking in a saucepan and it's a nice deep liquid, then you could add it and just make sure it's properly mixed in with the rest of the ingredients. So it's all coming up now nicely to the boil. At this stage the chicken will boil rather than fry, which is what I prefer. I think it tends to be more tender and you know, more pleasant on the tongue. So we're nearly there. just a couple more ingredients. Don't forget the salt. Salt makes a massive difference, and you can be fairly liberal with the salt. I just kind of shake it in, and it's very, very inaccurate. If I'm not using the sacks of salt, I find it difficult to get it right. I just basically kind of shake it in. I suppose if you were doing proper measurements, it would be about a teaspoon, maybe a teaspoon and a half. It can be too salty, but I think I'd rather it too salty than not salty enough. Not salty can be very bland and just disappointing, whereas just add a nice little bit of salt and it'll bring the flavours out. That's the chilli going in. Followed closely by a teaspoon or so of garam masala, which is the mixed spices, aromatic. That's the last thing to go in. Normally you would perhaps even put that towards the end of cooking. They're quite vibrant tastes and flavours, and you wouldn't want to put in that in first, because it'll get lost in the cooking. So I always put that in last, after everything else. So now all you need to do is make sure that everything is properly mixed together, and from now on it's really a question of when are the potatoes cooked. You can't finish the curry until the potatoes are soft and edible. There's nothing worse in a curry than a hard potato. So that can take anything up to 20 minutes, 25 minutes from this point. Obviously you don't want to cook them too much so that they just dissolve into the mixture and just make it a thick, kind of creamy soup with nothing distinguishable about the potato. So you need to kind of just test them every now and again with the point of a sharp knife, just to make sure that they're cooked through. The other thing you want to make sure is that it doesn't dry out completely and become too thick. So if needs be, you might need to add some water a little bit later on, but not too much, because the green peppers will give off a certain amount of liquid, and so will the chicken. So just put the lid on, leave it on a low light. You can see it's down to 3 now, so you don't want it bubbling away too fast at this stage, and leave it, check it every now and again, and then, as you'll see from the final shot, you'll end up with a lovely curry. So, Merry Christmas.